Okay, so let's cover the basic camera settings in 3ds Max and V-Ray. In doing this, a lot of people, they get a bit worried when it comes to cameras and setting them up and what they should be doing and how to do it and stuff. And really, setting up a camera is simple and it's something which you need to know. So we're just going to go over the basics so anyone can set them up. First of all, you can either take a viewport and you can come over here to the create panel and you can click on camera and you can take the camera you want and you can just place it and then select a viewport, press C, press F3. This is a glitch here in 3ds Max 2018 or V-Ray 3.6, I'm not sure which one. You click here, if this happens and you can't see objects, you can just go to facets or default shading, you can flip between these and your objects will come back. Anyhow, select the camera and down here you have this little button down here, so you can click on this and then you can truck the camera and you can bring it up and you just come here and you select the camera and you click over here and now you have it selected. So this is normally how you're going to be starting out with the camera. And you've got these little things down here so you can orbit the camera for moving it around to the right and left. You can truck it as we just did earlier along here. You can dolly the camera here so you can go forwards and backwards. It's called dollying. If you want to, you can roll the camera. You just click here and you can roll it, maybe if you're doing a spaceship that's flipping. I never have a use for rolling it, but it is there and I know it's there. So these are just sort of basic camera settings that you need to worry about. So you get your camera, you place it, and the other thing you do is you just go in the viewport top or left or right and you can press W, which is the same as clicking up here on this button here, and then you can then move the camera around so you can get it into the correct position that you want it to be in. Now in this bedroom I kind of want to see a bit more of the bed, so the other thing which you need to worry about is just moving this target around so you can get it along, and I'm not really quite seeing what I want to see. Now normally when it comes to a camera, what you want to do is you want to set it the height at eye level. So eye level for a normal person is about 1600. So you just type that in down here and you can move it up to 1600. So you move it up to 1600 and then you can select the target, and normally I'll be moving this down a bit so I get, I'm not looking up at the ceiling. I get a bit more of what's going on in the room. Now again, you select the camera and this is the first thing you need to worry about here is this focal length. So it starts off on the default and really, you can bring this down, and as you bring it down you're going to get more and more wide angled. So you need to be looking, in some cases you'll get a client and you'll drop right down to 18. I'll try never to go below 18. Occasionally you get down to some stupid thing like 16, but this is when someone wants to see the entire room, and you get clients who want that, so you need to know that you can do that. But basically you get something which you kind of like, and I'm thinking I want to see a bit more. Maybe I want to see some of this chair here. So you get something like that. I'm going for something like this, right? You select the target, move this around, and you just basically get the camera to start with into the position that you want. Now 16, it's not a rule, doesn't have to be there. It's just a guiding factor. So really, you're looking at setting it up, so something like this, and maybe something like this. And I kind of like the lampshade here. So I'm just going to select the target and just pull that around a bit. And that works pretty nice. Now, one of the other things which you need to know is you can take the camera, and obviously you can't do this in real life, but in Max and V-Ray you can click on it and you can move it back. You can go, you get these objects here in the scene. And then what's beautiful is you can come up here, you can click on miscellaneous in the camera settings, you can click on enable, and this gives you a clipping plane. So this means you can look through walls and look through things, and you can just set this up, and let's start out at a meter. I'm working in millimeters, so 1,000 is a meter, and you can move through here, and you can just clip off the whole thing if you like, but you can see how much you want to clip, which is great for getting a camera just beyond a wall and looking through it. And you can see here with this red line here how much you're, this red gate here in front of the camera, how much you're clipping. So you take it and just move it. And I'm going to try turning this off. I might put it back on. But you can see I'm clipping through most of the curtains here, but not the edge of them. And if I move this around, if you can't select the camera, you can just come up here, click on cameras, and then it'll only be selecting the camera, so you don't have to worry about everything else in the scene. And let's turn that clipping plane off. Okay, great. So that's the scene. This curtain here looks a bit weird, this sheer, so I'm just going to move that around, see if I just need a little bit more, a touch more. Let me bring that back a touch. Bring this over. Just so you can see there's a bit more going on there. Okay, great. So when you have your basic scene, your basic camera set up, you've got, okay, this is the image you like. You come along, and what you need to do, you don't have to really worry about this targeting distance. I mean, you can turn it off, in which case your camera would just, you press E or W, and you can go to local, because here if I rotate this, I'm going to get some weird thing going on. So if you change this from view to local, you can, do that, but normally I always leave this on. There's 3 settings you need to understand, you need to work with. First of them is this aperture. So here, this affects the exposure, it's the aperture size, so it's how big, how much light the camera is letting in. If you leave it at 8, if we do a little test here, I'm going to reset these to defaults as well, just so you can see what I'm doing here. The easiest way to do that is just change to another render engine, then change back to V-Ray. This is now a default. This will stay whatever you had it on the size of the render. And these are my test setting sizes. I often use something like this. Sometimes I'll go lower, but that's kind of normal. This is set to progressive. I'm going to change it to bucket. And I'm going to make this noise threshold, just bring this up to 1. And I'm going to drop this max subdivs down to 4. And then click on frame buffer and just make sure nothing's saving here. And make sure nothing is saving over here in render output. So now I've done that, make sure you've got your viewport selected and click render. Okay, so we've got quite a blown out scene here. Now the aperture here is set to 8, so if I lower this down to 5.6, it'll be a little bit less blown out. Then you can lower this down, you can Google professional photographers and see what they set up their aperture. But you can lower this down and you can affect how much light's coming in through this. Now the next thing which you need to worry about is the shutter. The type here by default is set to frames. And you've got all of this. This is how much of a second. So this is set to 1/1000th of a second. And obviously 100 would be 1/100th of a second. And this is how many seconds, 0.01 of a second. So you have these different things here which you can set it to. I'm always using this one. And I'll often set this to something like 1/20th of a second. But you can then worry about that, and you'll see, obviously, this will affect how long the shutter is open for, so how much light is coming in. Again, you can Google, professional photographers, and you can see what they set it to. You can Google interior photography camera settings, and you'll be able to get an idea and start to understand what sort of settings you should set your shutter to. So here we still have it fairly light and blown out. So the next thing here is your exposure. And you can do either EV or ISO. Now I know a lot of people like to do EV, and I know a lot of people like to do ISO. Personally, I always set it to this, but you can, again, this is your choice. So this is the sort of film that you're dealing with, and it affects how much light hits it. It has a different effect on the film. So again, this will change the render and it will adjust it and get it looking correct. And those really are the 3 things. Whenever I think of setting up a camera, those are the 3 things I think of as the most important things to do. You have your aperture setting here, you have your shutter speed, and you have your exposure. So I basically set those up to an amount I think is correct. That's what I kind of want it to be at. And then once that's set up to what I want it to be at, then I look at changing other things. I look at changing light levels and so on and so forth. But I'll start with this, and maybe I'll come down, I'll drop this down to, 200 ISO, and so you can see the light coming in and how that works. Now the other things which you need to know is your white balance. So if you set this to shade, you're going to get a yellower color image. If you set this to, 6500, which is daylight, that's pretty much white. And if you come down, you're going to get a slight more blue in the image. 5200, you're going to get more blue coming in. The other thing, a lot of people set it to custom, and they just leave the set at white, and that just means you get no color being brought in from the camera at all. But personally, I like to come in here, and rather than do sunlight, I'll normally either leave it on daylight or I'll set it to shade if I just want a slight color coming in from the camera, because naturally cameras aren't normally perfectly white, so normally there's some color coming in from that. Perspective control, this is something here which we need to deal with, and if you look at the camera settings, if you look at this, you see this isn't straight and that's not straight, and that's because the camera is pointing down. But in architectural photography, you're usually going to want to have this straight. So you click on auto vertical tilt correction, and that will straighten it up, and everything becomes nice and properly angled. Now the other thing, if you don't want to click on that, is you can play with this and you can just adjust it yourself. So you can get it to the correct amount and how you want it to be. And that will be horizontal, but so you can create some effects. But normally you just click on that and that will handle that. Lens distortion you don't need. So like I said before, you have clipping plane, which can be a real benefit and really use. And that's it. Those are your basic camera settings. And then you just take your lights and you just change your multiplier on your lights. But like I say, you can either adjust the light values or you can adjust your camera. So I'm going to adjust this. Obviously for less light you need to have it at a higher speed, so we'll try 1/100th of a second. So now it's just a dark render. Try 1/20th of a second. I would like to have this wrinkled detail in here but not blown out, so we'll just adjust till we get to that. Remember, you can also adjust your ISO or your EV value for this, your exposure value. Great. So for this render, I'm going to leave it at this, and then do some editing in Photoshop. And that's basically, those are the basic camera settings and what you need to worry about when setting up a camera in 3ds Max and V-Ray.